Hello and welcome to our project briefing for CNI Spring 2025. I'm Jason Clark. I work at Montana State University. Dorlin, do you want to introduce yourself?
Yeah, sure.
Uh,
Hi, I'm
Go ahead.
Dorlin Rossman. I'm also at Montana State University.
Yeah. And we're going to talk about a project that has a name, a tool. We're going to talk about a toolkit for values-driven AI in libraries. We've been thinking about this concept of responsible and explainable AI for a while, and this is our explanation of one of the tools or expression of that idea. We call it Viewfinder. Um, so this was not built alone. We have a really incredible project team. You can see the 8 of us. They're Dorland's in the on the left side of the screen. I'm on the top. But colleagues from University of Montana, Iowa State, James Madison, and our PI, our lead in this work is Sarah Meinheimer, who's in the top left. We also have an incredible advisory board who's at various times come into the project and helped us understand the questions we might ask. So you can just want to give credit to all the people that were part of this project. Our funding was from the IMLS and NLG leadership grant, and we are in phase 5, so we are winding down and ready to release something in spring. Today, we'll talk through, I'm going to jump pretty quickly to explaining the tool and a walkthrough, kind of show you where we are. Then we'll come back. Dorland's going to take us through the kind of stages and steps we went through to get to the tool I'm about to show, and then we'll talk a bit more about next steps. The motivation here was really around what we saw as forms of generative AI as ChatGPT became a consumer product, and the sort of pressure that created within our environment, our library and archives and museums environments. And we wanted to think about how can we use AI responsibly to improve services and bring some of our values into those implementations of AI. So the goals were to develop these practical resources and then bring our values and ethical implications and help staff that are within LAMs that are trying to think about implementation for AI in their own organizations. And one of our inspiration for this was Kate Zward, who's Director of Digital Strategy at the Library of Congress. Early on, in the context of speaking about AI, suggested that careful implementations and adoptions of this kind of tech, we could lead in a different kind of way. So what resulted was what we're calling Viewfinder, which is a toolkit for values-driven AI in libraries and archives. And this is where I'm going to actually take you through parts of the, and just do a quick walkthrough of where the prototype is. Quickly, it asks you to take a position on a particular AI implementation scenario as a stakeholder. You work through a series of ethical values for that implementation and then create actions to improve or correct that implementation. So it's a kind of iterative process. The tool prototype is available at that URL, but we also, we link that a number of times. And we have a project URL that we show at the end that has all the info on the project itself and the important links. So I'm not gonna, this is a wall of text. These are, the tool kind of opens up with instructions. I'm actually gonna work through, the idea is sort of card-based. And so what you do is you work through your instruction, then you move to the scenario card, which is what you see on the screen. You pick a scenario. You can also draft, there's room to draft your own scenarios. So these were built off of our literature review and kind of study of the field to understand common scenarios, but again, you could add your own, which is what you kind of see at the number 4 option. But for this walkthrough, I'm just going to kind of pick us and work through, and you can kind of see this stuff in action. So we're going to pick an AI tool, a third-party chatbot that moves to do some kinds of library service. So we said online reference. You give it a project stage. Then you move to the stakeholders card, and you pick who you might want to uh, ask questions of the particular implementation. So in this case, we can pick a librarian archivist. So that's what we'll do. Then you move to a values section where you're actually, again, these are values we saw inside of the reviews and in working through library and archive kind of mission statements. So this wasn't invented by us. We tried to use source documents to come up with representative, at least beginning values. And then again, you can always add other values yourself. And then what you do, you can see this again in that third-party AI chatbot to provide online reference for students on evenings and weekends. You move to a card where you actually delineate or list your values. This is if Dorlan and I were walking through this, picking from that other card and pull some of your own, fill out your values. Then you move through based on two stakeholders. So you work through your own values yourself, put those on the page. Then you work through, okay, how might these other stakeholders work through and think about this implementation of an AI chatbot for online reference service? If we pick two other stakeholders and do the same activity where you fill out what you might imagine their values are in that moment or with that particular chatbot idea. And so what you've got is an expression of values that you work through. You work through the stakeholders. You work through what your scenario might be, and then you're able to ask a series of, as you get these on the page or in your card, then you move through reflection prompts together. And usually this is done in a group setting where a group might come together, develop their own stakeholder values, develop their own values, and then come back together and talk about, with this AI chatbot implementation, do we need to adjust how we implement this, or is it looking okay in terms of library values, responsible AI, ethical AI implementations? You can see some of the questions that are on the page here. So the prototype is where it is. I'm also going to show at the end, we have design for a website and the actual card-based kind of mode of the toolkit. But Dawn is going to take us through how did we get to what you just saw. So Dawn, go ahead and talk a little bit more about that.
Yeah, so thanks, Jason. We had several stages that led up to getting to the tool that Jason's just been talking through. So we have broken that into 5 phases. So I'll talk through those first 3 phases, and then Jason will talk about the next 2 phases after that, and then some next steps. So the first phase was a literature review. So as you can imagine, before we submitted our grant, we had done some preliminary look at the literature, and we were trying to get a sense of how people talked about AI and what themes came out. So we searched, as you can imagine, across a lot of different library indexed databases, looking at education resources, looking at conference proceedings, all the places that we're having conversations about AI in libraries and museums and archives. And we search for a variety of words, and those are listed here. And in some, we ended up with 165 articles. And then we also looked at 77 case studies where at least one of the practitioners was a librarian. And the kinds of AI that emerged from this literature review overwhelmingly were around metadata extraction, natural language processing, image recognition. And then, you can see down from there. And one thing that was pretty obvious to us right away was that there were case studies for AI that are themed around some specific areas. So specifically classification, so classification of materials, how to use AI with chat reference, creating article summaries with AI, AI for search and discovery, and then recommendations for the use of AI. And these were all for libraries, archives, and museums. And from there, we looked to see how ethics and values emerged. And the ethical concerns that were there, you can see there weren't a lot. I mean, we had a lot of articles and none of them even reached 25 of the times they were mentioned, but it was around accuracy of AI. Are humans involved in the AI usage? Is there bias that comes forward with the AI tool? So these are the different themes that we categorized. And the number of papers that had ethics in any kind of form, it was 50 did and 40 did not. So right there, we're already seeing that almost half of our papers that we identified didn't even mention ethics as a concern. Mm-hmm. And then the ones that did use ethics tags heavily did not. They basically were usually around whether humans were in the loop and if they were accurate. And when we take those out, there were no ethics tags in the majority of those remaining papers. So the conclusions we came to were that basically a lot of the publications out there were more theoretical and thought pieces and were not about practical application of AI. And so in the ones that were actually case studies about the use of AI, only 55% had any mention of ethics. And then when you take out the human element and the accuracy element, only 35% of the case studies mention any form of ethics. And so what this project aimed to do was to make AI ethics more at the forefront of libraries' concerns at the beginning rather than as an afterthought of, oh yeah, well, maybe we should have thought about ethics at the beginning of this project. And so these tool cards are intended to help you think about those before diving into an AI project so that the ethical considerations are front and center. And so we took the literature review and we wrote that up, and it appears in an issue of Information Technology and Libraries. So we encourage you to go check out the literature review so you can see all the resources that we covered. Now, our next phase were the case studies. So from the groups out there, we put out a call for case studies from libraries. And from that, we tried to select a variety of types of AI usage that were happening and the conversations that were being held so that we weren't just focusing, for example, on using AI as a reference tool. So we talked about AI in archives and with collections and others that were using it, working directly with users so that we have a good variety of scenarios for you. So some examples there include AI chatbots for reference services, computer vision to generate metadata, AI enhanced search, vendor library machine learning partnerships, and AI machine learning for automated text extraction. And for those case studies, we asked the institutions participating to answer the same questions so that we had some comparison points across those different case studies. So we asked them to describe any ethical issues that arose as you implemented the project, potentially including how you considered and addressed potential harms associated with the implementation, if they engaged any stakeholders, and did they refer to any existing documentation, policy, or best practices. And so the concerns that arose from those questions included things like de-identification, data storage, and data sharing. So basically, how are we treating the data and the personalization of that data with AI, facilitating consultations and securing consent from community groups. So letting them know that AI was being used in the services and resources. Tensions between improving library services and preserving patron privacy. So where do you lean into other sets of ethics, but at the same time trying to deliver the best services you can? Staff downsizing and the pressures to do more with less. So is AI replacing librarians? Is it replacing staff? Or is it something that's supplementing what you already have? transparency and explainability. How much do we let our users know what we're doing and the people whose data is being analyzed? And then finally, the values alignment with external collaborators. So if we're working with, say, an IT group or a particular community, how do we reconcile library values with the values of those other entities? And so these 8 case studies were written up, and they are in a special issue of the Journal of eScience Librarianship from spring of 2024. So like literature review, we encourage you to go check out the case studies to learn more about the specifics that were addressed in them. And then phase 3 included practitioner and user workshops. So go to the next slide there. So we had a lot of workshops with a lot of different groups. So we did 16 workshops with 62 participants. Some of these were online workshops, some were in person. We did them with library and archives practitioners, and then also with library and archives administrators and with students, so our user group. So that provided a really good spectrum of the kinds of stakeholders that might be involved in some of the AI work out there to help inform our tool. So our goal was to produce original research data that can inform the development of a practical ethics tool. And you see that in what Jason showed you of seeing stakeholder groups and looking at what values arise for them and thinking about any AI you might want to do. And so most importantly, we ended up, I'll show you this in the next slide, with a values tool. Actually, if you can go back just for a second.
Okay.
We basically had people identify what values are relevant for AI in libraries. And then we did a dark version of this about what irresponsible AI looks like. So let's go to the next slide. So we asked people to say what values are the most relevant to the use of AI in libraries. And so people wrote these values on Post-it notes. And then on the next slide, you'll see people were asked to place what they consider to be the most important values towards the center and the less important ones. So much like a bullseye, the ones that are closest to the center are the values that you consider to be most important for AI in libraries. Okay. And then from there, we asked people, we found that generally if you ask people, instead of what responsible AI looks like, that when you ask them what irresponsible AI looks like, they have an easier time identifying like what doesn't smell good, what doesn't pass the smell test. So in that scenario, people can talk through like, this is what looks horrible. And what's kind of fun about that is that people, it's almost comical to think through some of the irresponsible design. So we found people were more engaged with that kind of question. So one of the scenarios we have, and I'll read this to you, it says, your library has a large collection of handwritten diaries that document the 19th century history of your local area. There's a new initiative to make these collections available and searchable online. As a part of this initiative, no additional budget allocation has been made for staff hiring. In response, you collaborate with your university's computer science department to build an AI tool that will perform OCR on the handwritten diary pages, then use natural language processing to create metadata records. This promises to provide new levels of access to the collection. And so the question we ask for this scenario is, how could you make the most unethical or most irresponsible design for this AI implementation? So here are some of the responses we got from these workshops we did. So and that includes boasting about the gain of staff time to administrators and suggest they can replace staff with machines. So you see that value of tight resources and staffing, a lack of integration into any existing digital preservation infrastructures, including no consideration of storage space or consideration of preservation requirements, completely ignoring any existing workflows and procedures. So basically just pretending like you have no experience with any of this, and then abdicating all design to CS faculty because they have the AI expertise. So just basically saying we don't know anything about this because we're not computer scientists.
Mm-hmm. And I just add, these are two of the workshop practices that we went through, but there were a couple of others, but we just wanted to feature, or this group understand that these were some of the more fun activities. And there were both stakeholders. You can imagine an administrator has a different answer to irresponsible AI and to the values circle versus a practitioner or a student. So all of that was informative. Here's another, Dorland's going to talk about some other results from irresponsible AI.
Yeah, so another example of answers would be to have no human review of metadata or OCR. So basically not consulting at all with collection staff about the decision to outsource, and disregard collection staff questions or potential input on the metadata should be scoped. So basically just completely throwing out any of your local expertise and just relying completely on the AI tool for how the project works. Not having any accuracy checks and no user testing. So this reinforces some of what we were seeing in the literature about the human elements with the AI tools, and obviously a strong feeling that humans should be involved somewhere if you were doing AI responsibly. So from here, Jason's going to talk with us about phases 4 and 5, and then the next steps.
Mm-hmm. Thanks, Dorland. That was great. So with phase 4, we also wanted to look at and just do a review of the frameworks that are available. And what I would say at the outset of this was there are lots of ways people think about how can I kind of slow down, create guardrails for AI, create frameworks to think ethically about AI. So part of what we want to do before we reinvented the wheel is just get out there and understand what's happening in terms of analysis tool development. So this phase was really looking at taking some of the values that we saw in the lit review, the case study, and the workshops, thinking about how do we kind of bring those values into and look at what these other frameworks were doing. Again, kind of really run with that irresponsible AI. I mean, it's kind of a fun thing to put on the screen, and usually when when you present it, there's a laugh. People have fun with it. But as we looked at the tool and framework review, we looked at various other places. There's even at a global level, international level, OECD has an AI catalog of not only implementations of AI, but implementations of frameworks for ethical AI. So we're able to look outside of our domain and really get a sense of what was out there. Again, we did a bit of a lit review, and we did. I'm just going to show a couple of that. This is where we collected and sort of tagged things, just so we had a sense of what was out there, and you can kind of see what metadata we put on each tool. But some of them that really inspired us, you should when we talk about the card-based approach, there were things like the data ethics canvas. That's sort of the different components, whether you work through the pink, then you move to the kind of reasons for that, for how you think about data ethics. And we thought we could use a similar kind of scenario or canvas for AI. The envisioning cards were another one that we saw, again, merging these kinds of ideas. We didn't have to reinvent the wheel, but we did get inspired by other kinds of frameworks and projects. And then we looked at the Library of Congress, which had been out in front of a lot of this in really understanding how to create people in the loop, human in the loop models, and how do you prepare data responsibly and get it ready for this kind of generative AI processes, procedures, and models. So all of that was a way for us to understand and come to that toolkit that I started our presentation with. So in phase 5, we worked through this. This is more of a listing of where you've kind of heard about, where we did workshops and working with case study authors. And just to give you a kind of timeline, you can see we're in phase 5, that visual design and the final tool development. We have a really strong prototype. And so what I wanted to kind of leave with is where we're working with a designer to come and finalize these different card-based, not only something that you'll be able to print out, but we'll have a website that kind of works through these different card-based processes or steps that you saw me sort of model at the beginning of the presentation. But you can see we're working with color, different icons to simulate or express when you're working with in the stakeholder setting or in the value setting and the scenario setting. So we're really excited about the look and feel. I'm just going to flash through a couple of these. You can kind of see the direction things are going. Again, this is a single card, a scenario card. And then these are values cards and stakeholders cards. And then finally, that card where you do that action reflection as a community together. You do your stakeholder work, do your values and scenario work, and then kind of come together and work through these reflection prompts to talk about, are there edits to any implementation we might do, or are we feeling like we're on a good track with our implementation of AI in this moment? So in terms of what you can do, we're obviously in phase 5. We're really close to release of the final toolkit. There's that URL again. I'm going to leave this up for a second. Please get in touch with any questions. We'll release the final toolkit probably this summer. So you should see a website and printable cards from that website. So if you're interested in this, please do stay in touch. That is our URL for the team. It's a project team it's off of our Montana State University Library website, but please check for updates. Please stay in touch. We're really excited to be close to finishing and releasing this project for the community. Thank you.
Thank you.